Let me ask you about visitor logs. The White House essentially said the president's private residence is private, and other presidents since the beginning of time, I think was the wording they said, have used the same logic, and they don't keep visitor logs. So how reasonable is it to expect visitor logs for anyone's personal home, any politician, and that includes Joe Biden?
So I think that this is kind of like when in the movie Johnny Dangerously, they deported a character to Sweden and he said, "I'm not from there." It's just a ridiculous thing that they've asked for because it sounds good, knowing that it's not really a thing.
I was looking forward to when the Republicans would get their hands on these imaginary visitor logs and they would see that Hunter Biden had visited his father. Did you know Hunter Biden was around classified documents? What do you think would be the reaction there if they did see a visitor's log? I'm not sure what hay they'd make out of it.
You know, I have a hard enough time predicting what's happened in reality. I'm not good at predicting what happens in non-reality.
That is a good answer, and I will move on to something that's actually real. President Trump, the former president, is being investigated for potentially violating the Espionage Act, getting in the way of justice here. Obstruction of justice is what we call that. Again, these are investigations. He's not been charged with anything. But is there any chance that happens to Biden, given that there is a difference in these two classified document situations?
So, as I've said to you before, the only thing I know for certain about the future is it hasn't happened yet. And I think that people who rush to defend Joe Biden here run the risk of getting out too far ahead of the story, because the story has expanded multiple times. At first it was, oh, they found some documents at his think tank, but not at his residence. Then it was, oh, they found some documents in his garage, but not in his house. And now it's, oh, they found documents in the think tank, the garage, and his house, but it's not too many. We'll see what happens in the future. I don't think that there is a reasonable probability right now of any of the obstruction charges, simply because it appears that Biden and his attorneys have been cooperating with the investigation. But having classified materials when you're not supposed to have them is a very serious thing.
Well, and that's the thing, is having classified material when you're not supposed to have it, especially having it in such an unsecured location, that seems to be illegal whether you mean to do it or not. I mean, most of the laws that we have in this country, it doesn't matter if you intended to break them. If you broke them, you broke them. But Republicans are saying, hey, the FBI should be raiding his home right now. And it seems like there's a difference here because the Biden administration, at least what they've told us, is that they have been participating in this. They've been the one letting the National Archives know, oops, we have something we shouldn't have. Here it is, as opposed to a subpoena, not fulfilling the subpoena, et cetera, which is what the Trump administration or those around Trump are accused of.
So I agree with the second half of what you said. The first half, knowledge actually matters a tremendous amount here. If Joe Biden thought that what he had was the shooting script to Jaws, but it turned out that page 27, somebody had snuck in a classified document, the fact that it was found in his desk, or found, which nothing's been found in his desk, but found in his garage, wouldn't mean that he had committed a crime. It's when somebody knowingly has classified documents or knowingly keeps classified documents when they're supposed to have returned them that you have the potential for criminal liability.
Well, that is why we have a former federal prosecutor on to set me straight. Now, one more question for you. Should there be somebody that is not the president's personal lawyer that is looking through these things? Because as far as we know at this point, Richard Sauber, who is one of Biden's personal attorneys that has a security clearance, has sort of been in charge of this. But even if there's not an FBI raid, should somebody more official or somebody not directly connected to President Biden have some sort of a hand in here to make sure that everything is going correctly from a neutral perspective?
So there are two sets of attorneys who are involved here who play very different roles. One is the White House counsel's office, who are attorneys to the office of the President of the United States. And the second are Biden's personal attorneys. The attorneys who are White House counsel staff owe a duty to the government of the United States, not to Joe Biden as an individual. If they find stuff, they essentially have to act as if they were FBI agents.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation in your cable lineup. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-based, unbiased coverage.